Okay, so the first thing I do whenever I get done with a video, shooting any video, is I check the audio. When we're doing video, there's all kinds of different scenarios that we shoot in. We shoot in crazy resonant rooms that have no treatment whatsoever. And so when you're doing video on the go, audio is not always a given if it's going to be any good or not. So that's always the first thing I check. And in this video, I'm going to be showing you how to edit vocals so you can get the best sound out of them. So we're going to be going through how to take noise out of audio, how to EQ, compress audio, so it sounds as good as possible. And also something that I don't think many people go over, but how to master the audio for vocals so that you have the kind of high-end punch and volume that's in many commercial projects today. So let me go ahead and get into it. I'm just going to start with showing you before and after of one of the audio projects that I worked with. So let me get the headphones on. Okay, so this is before. So you can hear, this is how the audio sounded with pretty much no treatment on it whatsoever.
Hey, this is Ray Donnelly, and I'm the owner here at the Wild Gallery in Austin, Texas, where we feature Native American art, both traditional and contemporary Native American art.
Okay, so let's switch this now and let's take a listen, see how it sounds with the effects on it now.
Hey, this is Ray Donnelly, and I'm the owner here at the Wild Gallery in Austin, Texas, where we feature Native American art.
Okay, so despite whether you like it or not, one thing you can definitely tell is that there's a huge difference in audio. And so I chose this one because it's probably the absolute worst case scenario you could get in with audio. First of all, this is iPhone audio. So, I'm sure many of us have come across this, but with an iPhone's audio quality, no matter what you do, you're only going to get it to so good of a level because the audio format and the recording method of an iPhone just is not that great whatsoever. The preamps are not good audio preamps. And so, the quality is just not that great. And also, you can tell by listening to the first recording that he was in a very resonant room. There's a lot of reverb in this room. It's a big open gallery that he's in. And so sound's just jumping around everywhere and it just does not sound that great. So there's a number of things we did with this track. I'm going to go through it. I'm going to go through it quickly and show you all the different steps we did by looking at my effects chain. And then we're going to start working on another piece of audio that just sounds better, that was recorded in a much better way. And so the end product's going to be way better than what we did with this one. But let's go through the effects chain and see what we have. So the first plugin we have is just a gain plugin. And so this is used to gain stage the audio. So we want to get it to negative 12 dB. That's where we want to start editing our audio. It gives us a lot of headroom to work so we can amplify the audio in different stages of the mixing process. And so we'll get into that in a bit, but we want to start with the audio at negative 12. So just to show you here, if I deselect all these and I just start playing here.
Hey, this is Ray Donnelly.
You can see that it's around negative 10, negative 12 dB. So let's go ahead and go to the next plugin, which is a DeEsser. So this is just a standard de-essing effect. It's just to take the highs out of his voice so he's not hissing so much, and it's especially necessary in something like an iPhone recording because, like I said, the preamps are really terrible on those iPhones. As expected, they're not meant for that. But the highs, the S sounds are very high and screechy, so de-esser is very necessary. The next plugin is a wave plugin, and it's the Z Noise plugin. And so this plugin, it's amazing. I think it's necessary for anybody who does video, especially if you're getting paid for commercials and things like that. Z noise is super, super necessary. Basically, what Z noise does is it learns the noise that's in the video, and it allows you to cancel that noise out. So it allows you to reduce the noise up to a point by learning it. And so I was looking for this plugin for a long time, and once I had it, I use it in every project that I work on. Okay, so the next plugin is the NS1, and that is the noise suppressor plugin. So this plugin is super, super helpful, and it's very, very easy. I mean, it's again, this is a wave plugin, but it's so simple. All you have to do is it's one knob. You just push it up and down to suppress noise automatically. And coupled with the Z noise plugin, it's really, really effective. Now, this might sound a little overboard, but the last plugin is a wind noise suppressor. So this is another noise suppressor plugin to clean up audio. And it's similar to the Z noise. It learns the noise that's going on, but unlike the Z noise, it works off an EQ. So it has like a smart EQ that EQs where the noise is prevalent, and you can suppress it. You can suppress it by moving the threshold fader up and down. So this is a very important part of the process, and this is where you can choose a number of different plugin companies to work with. I use Slate primarily for my mixing plugins like EQs, compressors, preamp, emulations, things like that. And so in this rack, there's actually a couple of plugins, and there's a EQ, a compressor, and basically what's just a sort of like a flavoring plugin. It adds a little flavor to the audio, which is the revival plugin. It shimmers and thickens whatever's coming through it. In this case, it'd be vocals. Let's see. And the last plugin, let's see. Okay, so the last plugin is a channel EQ. And so this just goes over the top of everything. And the way I have it is I basically just have the lows cut off so that any mud that was accrued throughout the plugins, I just clip that low end because there's nothing that needs to be heard below 100 hertz. So let's hear this again without these plugins and then with the plugins. And then I'll kind of go through them one by one and explain the settings real quick. So here's without the plugins.
Hey, this is Ray Donnelly, and I'm the owner here at the Wild Gallery in Austin, Texas, where we feature Native American art.
All right, and so here's with the plugins.
Hey, this is Ray Donnelly, and I'm the owner here at the Wild Gallery in Austin, Texas, where we feature Native American art, both traditional in Austin, Texas.
Okay, so what we did with the EQ is we have the input at a very low setting and the output at a pretty reasonable setting. We didn't do too much to this EQ. All we're doing is we're having it pass through to where it hits the EQ at around like 1 or 2. We just want it to touch the EQ. So if y'all are working on Logic, you're used to Logic, then let me go ahead and get these things up on Logic so you can get an idea of what I'm talking about if you're not familiar with the Slate plugin. So for example, if we were to do this, I'm just going to do EQ and compressor with Logic so people know how to do it on both. So vintage EQ, console EQ, let's see. Okay, cool. So I have my EQ and compressor here. And if you haven't used the console EQ with Logic, it's actually a really, really good EQ that also emulates the Neve, and it sounds very, very good. It's an additive EQ, so you want to push it. Something like the channel EQ is meant to take audio away. So this is meant to add gain to your audio. So let me do a little quick editing on it so you can hear. And then I'll do it, and then I'll work on the compressor too. So let's get it going here.
Hey, this is Ray Donnelly, and I'm the owner here at the Wild Gallery in Austin, Texas, where we feature Native American art, both traditional and contemporary Native American art. And we're in downtown Austin, so I thought it'd be fun today to just show you a few paintings that we've got here in the gallery and focus, first of all, on a Choctaw artist whose name is Dylan Cavan. He lives in Oklahoma. He's an Oklahoma Sooner fan, which is not good.
Okay, so we just added some gain there on the lows, took some away from the mids, and then pushed the highs a bit. So, again, it's really simple, pretty subtle here, but it adds some nice flavor and color to the audio. And then let's go to the compressor and let's get that set up. And again, you'll see that it's pretty subtle on the compressor.
Hey, this is Ray Donnelly, and I'm the owner here at the Wild Gallery in Austin, Texas, where we feature Native American art. Hey, this is Ray Donnelly, and I'm the owner here at the Wild Gallery in Austin, Texas, where we feature Native American art, both traditional and contemporary Native American art. And we're in downtown Austin, so I thought it'd be fun today to just...
Okay, so that's pretty good there. And let me also note, because you saw there that it was pretty subtle on the compressor, and let me note that with vocals that are going to be on video, with straight, like it's almost like narration vocals with this, you don't want to push your compressor too hard, because you don't, first of all, when people are talking, there isn't so much difference in their projection. They usually stay pretty much the same, and so there's no reason to push the compressor too hard. And especially if they're in a not so good room, all you're going to do is you're going to bring up the noise if you push the compressor. So you just want to keep the compressor really subtle, just hitting the higher or hitting the louder parts. So that's what we did there. And lastly, I had a channel EQ that if we play, we can see that it hits the lower frequencies. So,
hey, this is Ray Donnelly, and I'm the owner here at the Wild Gallery in Austin, Texas, where we...
Yeah, so you can see in the analyzer that the lows are just being taken out. So there's not even any information there after everything's said and done. And so we're just doing it again just to clean everything up. So that's the mixing process. As we heard with what we had before, it does a whole lot in clearing up the audio and then just making something workable with something that wasn't very workable beforehand. So now we're going to go into what I think most people skip over for video, and that is the mastering process. And so that might sound crazy and complicated and maybe too much for videos, but the cool thing is once you have a chain finished, you just just bring it up whenever you want. You basically can just save the settings and bring up the mastering whenever you need to. So I'm going to switch my projects over, and we're going to take a look at the mastering process on another piece of audio that sounds better than this. Okay, so we have the new project up, and I'm going to go through what is on my mastering template so you can emulate these effects and you can apply them to your own project once you're done with the mix, because the mastering process is where you get a lot of the cleaning up and rounding out of the audio, as well as a lot of the volume, which is really important. I'm sure plenty of us who work in video have thought, like, why can't I get that commercial sounding audio? Why is it whenever I create a project, it just like the sound is lower. It's not as, it's not as loud. It doesn't sound as crisp and as clean as like you hear on commercials. And I can tell you, if you're not doing a mastering chain, if you're not putting anything on your mastering chain in your audio projects, and that is definitely a reason why. So let me go through this and show you my mastering chain, and then you can hear the difference of what it does to audio. So let's take a listen to how it sounds without any mastering, and then I'll share how it sounds with the mastering on it. So this is the audio file I'm working on with no mastering, and it was actually recorded here, so it should sound similar to this, but it was recorded in my studio setup with a Sennheiser ME66 mic. So just to give you a little context of what you're listening to. So you can see here that there's I have my mixing chain here that was the same as previously. So here's with the mixing chain, but there's no mastering here. So let's take a listen.
Gary Halbert is he was a man. He's a myth, a legend. He's an enigma. I've actually tried to find actual numbers of he did revenue numbers in some way.
Okay, so we can tell that. I mean, that sounds pretty good. It's clear, it's crisp, it's EQ'd, and everything like that. So that sounds good. And of course, it was done with a nice mic in a pretty good room. So the audio sounds pretty good. Now let's see where we can take it with mastering.
Gary Halbert is he was a man. He's a myth, a legend. He's an enigma. I've actually tried to find actual numbers of he did revenue numbers in some way, shape, or form. They're really hard to find because you hear anything from.
Okay, so you can tell right off the bat, it's a good deal louder. So that's one thing, and that's a very important thing because you can't, unless you're going through a mastering process with your projects, you can't get that kind of volume. Because one thing I used to do a while ago with my projects, if I would just bring audio straight into Final Cut and I would just take it to zero. I would take my fader and I would bring up the volume until it's peaking. But you're probably missing out at about 6 decibels, 6 to 8 decibels if you're doing it that way. And it's just not going to sound that great. So let me show you what the mastering process consists of. And then you can add what you want in there. So let's go through it here. So again, first thing we have is gain. And so with the gain, all I want to do is I want to get my audio at 0. So that's where I like to master because I'm really not going to be adding any gain throughout this. So, I don't like. So I like to start it at 0. I don't like to leave any real headroom on the mixing for the mastering. This is just my preference. There's a lot of people who tell you different. -3, -6, -12. It's all up to the person mastering and what they want to do. But I just try and get it to 0. So you can see.
Gary Halbert is he was a man. He's a myth, a legend. He's an enigma. I've actually tried to find actual numbers of he did revenue numbers in some way, shape, or form. They're really hard to find because you hear anything from $100,000 a month to $2 million for a campaign of some kind.
Okay, so we're at about -1 there, and that's pretty good. So we can start with that. That seems to be good enough because you can see in my waveform actually that this is pretty much the highest peak in this little section here. So you can pretty much assume that no audio is going to be louder than that. So -1's good. We'll start there. So the next plugin I have is a tape machine emulation. And so again, this is Slate that I'm working with for this. And the emulation is really, really beneficial for sound because it emulates what a tape machine would do, which is warm the sound, round out the edges, and with a audio file, with a digital audio file, this is so desirable because coming out of something like Logic, when you're using all digital plugins, you're going to want to bring back some of that warmth that was lost with all the processing that you're doing. And so a tape machine emulation plugin in the mastering process does a really good job of rounding this out. So let's hear how it sounds before and then kind of midway through the audio, I'll turn it on.
Gary Halbert is he was a man. He's a myth, a legend. He's an enigma. I've actually tried to find actual numbers of like he did like revenue numbers in some way, shape, or form. They're really hard.
Okay, so yeah, you can hear in the audio that there's almost like a little more gravel to his voice. Once we turn it on and those and the tape starts spinning, there's a little more dirt. There's a little bit of grit in his voice. Just something to not make it so clean and sanitized. And so basically, my settings with my with this tape emulation plugin is I just have the input at around, let's see, -1 and the outputs at +1. So, or it's -1.6 plus 1.6. I always keep my input and output on my tape emulations chained. So things just don't get too crazy with the gain. And then I don't like to overdrive on vocals. So if your vocals are chained, you can like press it up and make it really crunchy. Like you can hear.
Gary Halbert is he was a man.
Like there's a lot of gain. There's a lot of overdrive in his vocals, and I don't like to do that. That's a bit too much. So I keep it on negative. It just cleans it up, but still adds flavor to it. All right. So the next plugin is the center plugin. And this one is not necessary, but I like to use it. This is a wave plugin. And so it basically, I think it gives it a flavorful punch and width on the vocals. So it's again, this is pretty simple, but let's take a listen to what it does here. And this is something you're definitely going to need headphones to hear. If you're listening to this at this point, I'm sure you've put on headphones because it's just kind of self-explanatory. But with this one, unless you're wearing headphones, you probably won't hear anything.
Gary Halbert is he was a man. He's a myth, a legend. He's an enigma. I've actually tried to find actual numbers of like.
Okay, so that was the center plugin, and so you can hear that. You can hear that the width just kind of spread on it. And you can just copy my settings here. Basically, I put the punch a little towards the center. I put the highs a little towards the sides, the lows a little bit on the center. And I have the highs boosted like 3.5 decibels and the center boosted just a couple. It's actually going to require me to take the master down, maybe like, let's just take it down like 3 decibels to compensate a little bit. But pretty simple settings here. Just adds width to the vocal, makes it sound really nice and full in the headphones, and gives it a real big vocal sound, which is cool. Okay, so the next plugin is the tube EQ, and so I started off a vocal template for this plugin, and it's the tube vocal. So if you go down here, click tube vocal. That's pretty much what I did here. I just made a few little tweaks, but I just passed it through this tube vocal. And this is another emulator plugin. It's a hardware emulator that makes kind of gives punch to the low ends, a little bit of more sparkle on the highs, and it gives it a nice analog warmth, which is really great to have again on digital sound. So let's take a listen before and after.
Gary Halbert is he was a man. He's a myth, a legend. He's an enigma. I've actually tried to find actual numbers of like he did like revenue numbers in some way.
Okay, so you could hear it gave it a bit of low punch. So that's definitely what I was going for. And I have the low boost up here at 3 decibels. But then it also has a little bit of shimmer in the highs. And this is nice to do after the mixing process because it affects the audio file as a whole. And so I at like around 10 kilohertz, I boosted the highs as well. So that's pretty much the extent of what I did there. But let's go to the next plugin, which is arguably the most important plugin in the chain, and that is the limiting plugin. And this is a really smart limiter that's used by Slate. Now, I also have another limiter at the end you can use if you're using Logic, but this limiter is really, really fantastic. If this limiter is worth getting Slate alone, because I think Slate's like $10. I have no affiliation with Slate, but I think it's like $10 a month. And it is a really, really great limiter. And I'll kind of go through the settings briefly of what they do, but let's hear it before and after. Note the change in volume.
Gary Halbert is he was a man. He's a myth, a legend. He's an enigma. I've actually tried to find actual numbers of like he did like revenue numbers in some way, shape, or form. They're really hard to find because you hear anything from $100,000 a month to, $2 million for a campaign.
Okay, so you can hear that the volume was raised quite a bit after adding this plugin, and that is the goal. That is the goal of the limiting plugin, is to add that volume and give it that punch. And so just to go through briefly what these settings do, the low punch accentuates the lows, and it does it in a very smart way. So this limiting plugin actually analyzes your audio file and it identifies the transients. So it doesn't act like an EQ, but it takes the actual data in the audio file and it punches it up in the audio file itself. So with the lows, it takes the low data in the transients and it accentuates it with this low punch dial. With the detail dial, it does the same thing, but for highs. So I have it just like, just punched up a bit. I have the details accentuated a bit. It's at around like a 3 on both. And then the gain is basically how a normal limiter acts. It's just one knob boosts the audio. And so this limiting plugin is raising the volume, but it's also kind of compressing your sound. So you don't want to go crazy with this because I can make it louder, but by doing that, you're squashing your vocals. And so I only have it I only have the volume boosted at about 4 decibels. So the next dial is dynamic perception. This is another plugin you don't want to go too crazy with on vocals if you're just doing vocals by themselves, because it's not terribly necessary to do it, because in like a song, there's all kinds of instruments, there's all kinds of things going on to where things need to be heard a little bit more clearly. But with vocals, there's already natural transients and everything's already kind of clear, so it's not too necessary to boost that crazy. And the last dial here is basically how you want those transients to be treated. Do you want them to be slammed and go hard, or do you want to smooth them out? And so, of course, we're working with vocals. We want to make them a little on the smoother side. So that's basically my limiting settings for my project. Now, I do actually also put a hard or a brick wall limiter on the end of this, and I just have it raised a decibel here. But let me take off the limiter here so you can hear how it sounds if we just had this as a limiter and boosted the audio this way. So I'm going to start it here, and I'm going to boost the limiter to where it's at an appropriate volume without getting too crazy.
Gary Halbert is he was a man. He's a myth, a legend. He's an enigma. I've actually tried to find actual numbers of like he did like revenue numbers in some way, shape, or form. They're really hard to find because you hear anything from $100,000 a month to, $2 million for a campaign of some kind, but I don't know how reliable they are. So I cannot say for sure that he actually did all these crazy things. I can say for sure that he talked about it like crazy, and it sounded like he did a lot of these crazy things.
Okay, so I got it to about 5.5 decibels in the mastering chain, and that sounds pretty good with limiter. And this is just a very rudimentary brick wall limiter. It sounds pretty good. It does the job. It just doesn't have all the other, bells and whistles that a Slate plugin has. But if you're just using Logic, then this plugin is really great, simple, and easy to use, and it gets the job done. So again, that's pretty much the process there. So we had the mixing process, the mastering process. And if you want to read a little bit more in detail, I suggest you check out the blog on the description I have, because I go into a little more detail on everything in that. But yeah, I hope that you enjoyed this video. I hope that you use it for all your future projects with video, and I hope it makes your audio sound awesome for the next projects that you work on.